Let me get some questions from the audience, and this is from Michael Pierce of Wyoming. As a father of a child with special needs, my family has benefited from government social programs. Nevertheless, when does our debt reach the level where good intentions today become crushing burdens on the next generation tomorrow?
So I think that's a great question, and I think that spirit in that question is really touching in a sense. This is a person who has a child with special needs, and yet they're suggesting they're willing to be part of the shared sacrifice. But I have to say there are right ways and wrong ways to do things. And I'm just going to say from a policy perspective, and I say this to everybody in this room, there is enormous discussion about the revenue side and the Medicare side. But from a policy perspective, from a values perspective, we should be very deeply troubled by the Medicaid cuts in the House Republican plan. I want to make clear what they are. This is not my numbers, this is theirs. After they completely repeal the Affordable Care Act, which would take away coverage for 34 million Americans, according to the Congressional Budget Office, after they've completely repealed that, they do a block grant that would cut Medicaid by $770 billion. In 2021, that would cut the program by 35%. Under their own numbers, by 2030, it would cut projected spending in Medicaid by half, by 49%. So, of course, I don't think or imply any negative intentions or lack of compassion, but there is a tyranny of the numbers that we have to face. And here's the tyranny of the numbers. 64% of Medicaid spending goes to older people in nursing homes or families who have someone with serious disabilities. Another 22% goes to 35 million very poor children. Now I ask you, how could you possibly cut 35% of that budget and not hurt hundreds of thousands, if not millions of families who are dealing with a parent or grandparent in a nursing home or a child with serious disabilities? How is the math possible? If you tried to protect them, mathematically, you would have to eliminate coverage for all 34 million children. Now, I know some people didn't like when the president mentioned that this was going to be very negative for families, for those amazingly brave parents, and he may be one of them in our country, who have a child with autism or Downs and who just are enormously committed and dedicated to doing everything they can to give their child the same chance every other child has. But here's the reality. Medicaid does help so many families in those situations. Over the years, we've allowed more middle-class families who have a child with autism to get help in Medicaid. There's a medical needy program that says when you spend down, will count the income after you've spent down medical costs. There's a Katie Beckett program that was passed by President Reagan that says if you have a child that's in need of institutional care, you can get help from Medicaid. This is a life support for many of these families. But these are the optional programs in Medicaid. These are the ones that go to more middle-class families. If you're going to cut 49% of projected Medicaid spending by 2030, do you really think these programs will not be seriously hurt? So when we say that the tyranny of the math is that this Medicaid program, this Medicaid cut, will lead to millions of poor children, children with serious disabilities, children with autism, elderly Americans in nursing homes, losing their coverage or being or having it significantly cut. We are not criticizing their plan. We are just simply explaining their plan.
Jean, one more question from viewers from Andover. Won't putting America back to work help reduce the deficit?
You know, absolutely. And I think when people talk about the efforts that were done, I mean, let's understand what happened. We inherited a very, very deep deficit. And there's no question that we took efforts through the Recovery Act to add money temporarily to the deficit to help get our economy back. But we don't think those increase the deficit or the debt. We think they help prevent us from going into a prolonged deep recession or even a depression. So of course growth is important. And we're at a point right now where we have 9% unemployment, we have private sector job growth strengthening, but not good enough. And so we have to do this the right way. We have to do it with balance. We need to be able to say that, that we are giving confidence to investors and people who create jobs around the world that the United States is still a good place to invest because we get our fiscal house in order. We're willing to implement significant cuts and select revenue increases to do so, but we do so in a way that's phased in and doesn't hurt our economy, because that would be counterproductive. And secondly, and I just want to make just an overall point, because I think it's very important. For so many people, like Pete Peterson and others, who have devoted themselves to us dealing with the baby boom retirement, the long-term entitlement, part of the theory behind us dealing with us is that we didn't want to be a society that spent so much just on older Americans that we lost our ability to invest in our children, in education, in the science and research and innovation that's important to our future productivity. It was very much that type of thinking that led so many people to want to deal early on with the aging of our population. But what is happening right now is there's become a very, I think, unfortunate desire to simply cut domestic discretionary spending across the board to unprecedented low levels, even though this is the area where the National Institute of Health is in, the National Science Foundation, Pell Grants, Head Start. We need to do fiscal discipline going forward. But as the president said, you don't unload a plane that's loaded up too high, needs to have some weight taken off it, but you don't take the engine out. So we need to have a balanced plan that does not take our levels of domestic spending to such low levels that it might sound good for press releases, it might sound good, but where we are actually defying the fundamental one of the fundamental goals of dealing with our long-term entitlement situation by actually failing to invest in our children, failing to invest in research, medical research, innovation. And I think that's very, very important as we go forward.
Which aspects of Chairman Ryan's plan would the administration be willing to incorporate to get the Republican buy-in?
Look, I think there's places that are very difficult for us to go to. I think the hardest really, when you look at Medicaid block grants and food stamp block grants, those are things that I think would be very, very difficult for us to ever support. Number one, we think it takes away the basic social compact in those programs that would lead to the type of very unfortunate cuts we just discussed. Secondly, I don't think they're wise economic policy. The Federal Reserve estimates that the fact that we have what they call automatic stabilizers, things like food stamps and unemployment insurance and Medicaid, that where we increase spending as we go through recessions or more people go into poverty, helps smooth out our business cycle, our recessions. Doing them in block grants not only will be bad for some of our most hard-pressed Americans, it will also be, I think, unwise macroeconomic policy because it will reduce the automatic stabilizers in our economy. So I think that those kind of block grants are difficult. We are open to talking about many ideas on the Medicare, but for the reasons I've discussed, I think the current House Republican Medicare plan is just very, very poorly designed. I mean, it just, to make beneficiaries pay $6,000 more so that the government can get $615 more in savings. That's what people say about my basketball skills. He's slow, but he can't jump. It puts a lot of cost on beneficiaries, but it doesn't save much for the government. So I think that when if you want to go into the areas of reform, you have to do so carefully, and you have to be not upset basic guarantees that I think are important to our safety net. But look, we have basically agreed to a level of domestic discretionary savings that are consistent with the Bowles-Simpson plan. we have put in a level of Medicare and Medicaid plan savings consistent with the Bowles-Simpson plan. The only two places where we don't go as far as they do are on defense, and they actually do more revenues than we do. So we are the ones that are very close to the bipartisan fiscal plans. We have a balanced plan. We're taking nothing off the table. Look, you know, what I hope is, I think Chairman Ryan is, you know, he's somebody I like very much personally, and I think he has a lot of sincerity. But I think what's happened is that in their desire to live by what is an ideological view that you can't have a penny of revenues, it forces you to do things like the Medicaid savings that when you look at the details of, I don't think many of the people who voted for them would really support if they understood the full implications of.
Gene, final question here. What are the administration's fiscal goals, top priorities this year, and how will you achieve them briefly?
I think that at the moment, you know, I think the most important fiscal goal, and this is one place where I think I agree very much with Chairman Ryan said, we have to get a down payment now. A lot of what people judge around the world is not that they say, you know, I don't know that people, when they look at what gives confidence in our economy, says, oh, if it's at 2.2, we have confidence, at 2.8, we don't. I think they look and ask. I think they start with the view of enormous confidence in the United States. We are fortunate. People have a positive bias towards the United States. We are, even in an ugly economy, we're often the prettiest kid in the room. We're often the safest haven, even when people are most roiled around the world. So we have something very special, and we need to protect it. That's why you can't play games with things like a default. You just can't play games. It's a treasured asset that we inherited from Alexander Hamilton, that U.S. credit standing, our credit worthiness, our full faith in credit is something that is the gold standard. You don't even want to get near doing anything that would in any way lessen that. And on the fiscal discipline side, I think what people would like to see is that even with the types of division we have, we as a country are capable of coming together and doing something serious. If we got a serious down payment on deficit reduction in the summer of 2011, I think that would have been way above the expectations that people would have had in November when they saw we were going to be in a period of divided government. And my guess is that a serious down payment isn't going to get you all the way there, but the path to deficit reduction doesn't always happen all at one time. And to end on, or to be bipartisan, you know, President Bush, the older President Bush, started in 1990. He didn't go far enough, but President Clinton bravely put forward a plan with no Republican support in 93. And then in 97, dealing with Medicare, two incredible adversaries, Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, came together. So I think what people need to see is that we're on the right path. So I think getting a serious deficit reduction package, which means looking for the areas we agree on, and trying to press each side to move a little bit from long-held positions so that you hold hands and jump together and do something that's politically difficult for each to do alone, but together is politically viable and is economically important to the country. That would be the most important thing. I think that would be enormously confidence building. And I will say that I'm fortunate to be one of the people at the table for the Biden discussions. And if you're in that room, you would really be struck by the seriousness of purpose, the degree people are going line by line, and I think there's trust building up. I didn't know Eric Cantor very well before this, and probably disagreed on virtually nothing with him, but you sit in a room and you have discussions, and everyone, including Congressman Cantor, comes very well prepared, ready to talk specifics as opposed to giving speeches. And I can't tell you that this Biden negotiating group is not a commission. It is a negotiating group with people selected by the leadership to negotiate. I can't tell you we'll get all the way to the finish line, but there's a real seriousness of purpose in that room that gives me some optimism.
Gene Sperling, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Gene Sperling, and Paul Ryan for their candor and their inside perspective on crafting solutions to our great country's issues, the deficit and debt challenges.